Hey, YouTube, my name's Dan. I have been a type 1 diabetic for over 37 years now, and want to tell you a little bit something about my story. Uh, it's kind of an awkward part, not something I'm a little embarrassed about, but at the same time, hoping that just chatting through it with you might be a little cathartic. And for some of you, perhaps not many, but for some of you who have a shared experience in this, you might also kind of find something to relate to that will be helpful for you. And that is especially earlier in my diabetes, but up until about a decade ago, I would have relatively frequent grand mal seizures. I know that's not the term. I think they call it tonic chronic, something like that now. But grand mal was a term that I was given when I was having them more often. So that's what I'm used to. It's kind of a funny name because grand meaning big and mal meaning bad. So it's like big bad seizure is basically what they were. Basically, what defines one is that you lose consciousness and thrash. It's kind of be accompanied with screaming. It's kind of the worst kind of seizure that is known. So when my blood sugar would get too low, particularly at night, because while sleeping, I wouldn't be aware of some of the symptoms that would have warned me if I was awake. My blood sugar dropped low enough that my brain would not be getting the sugar that it needs to survive, and would basically start wigging out, which is bad because you don't want to have a seizure, of course, but is at least good because it would notify my parents that they had to help me. So that was weird because from a young age, you kind of recognize that you need more help. You're needing your parents' help in ways that your classmates and stuff aren't. Let me just kind of catch myself here really quick. Type 1 diabetes is incredibly manageable, right? I have friends with all kinds of cancers and people who have faced all kinds of diseases that there's so much less treatment help. There's so much less support. Honestly, of all the things, diseases that I could have, type 1 diabetes is a very manageable one. So I don't want to make this overly dramatic statements that suggest that I'm not aware of the fact that this is largely manageable, and frankly keeps getting easier because technology is improving, medicines are improving, our general sense of medical knowledge is improving, and that has borne such incredible jumps in diabetes research. So let's just own that up front. But nonetheless, my folks had to be kind of extra diligent with me. I remember wanting to go on trips or things with school or church that would be overnight, and basically, especially when I was quite young, couldn't go unless one of my parents were the chaperone, and they just stepped up in such incredible ways. Had incredible parents. While I was tuned out and screaming and thrashing, they'd have to administer gels, and there's a shot that they can give you, which helps bring you out of it quicker. That shot also helps get you sick. Your stomach tends to be pretty ill the next day. It's called glucagon, but that would snap you out of it. And they would have to do that multiple times a year, 3, 4, 5. Sometimes I'd go through a stretch where I'd have multiples in a week. I don't keep really good stats on it, but it kind of depended on a whole lot of things. Stress, activity level, changes in diet, changes in medication. Just going through puberty, frankly, can kind of spike the ball in some pretty crazy ways. So, yeah, you get a pretty good sense that you're a stressor at times. So that was, kind of awkward. I don't know as I've always dealt with it really well. I can kind of play things out in my head maybe too much or be a little melodramatic. So I'm sure I kind of trumped it up, perhaps even bigger than it was. But I kind of want to talk through 3 different elements: physical, mental, emotional. Physically, people sometimes may not realize that having a grand mal seizure is physically exhausting. Even if it's a small motion where you're just moving in a relatively controlled environment where you're not thrashing out too much, just doing the same thing with your muscles as incredibly tight and tense as you can, repeatedly, very, very fast, for a short span of time, you are working out muscles that you just don't use that way. And particularly in my abs, I would just do these little crunches and either lifting my legs up or twisting my back up, etc. Again, I don't want to be too dramatic, but afterwards, you just feel like you got hit by a train. My body would be so sore and so just achy. That's one of the things you had to kind of walk through. Mentally, and this is a double-edged sword, you come out of it slow, right? Your brain. I'm not a doctor, so please don't use me as a citation of exactly how these things work. But it's my little, layman's terms. My brain's basically starving and almost incapable of what I'll call conscious thought, and slowly redevelops the ability to familiarize myself with my surroundings and people. So the number of times I've woken up in strange places, or maybe on the floor, maybe on the hall, or in an ambulance, and you start to be able to think again. So I would know kind of who I was, but couldn't quite piece out who was around me, though it would be my parents or someone I knew very well. Where you are, what's happened, why am I here? Kind of a sense of panic, because you use your brain, you need your brain, and yet you're almost, though your brain isn't working, you're kind of aware of the fact that it's not working, and you can't quite piece it together. And then slowly more and more parts start to fire and re-synergize, I guess, and your mind kind of starts to work as it did previously. I don't know if this is the only thing that's caused it, but I feel like I've always had perhaps a bit high sense of sympathy and empathy. I get those confused sometimes, but sense of, for folks who are special needs or have been in accidents and such where their mental capacities are limited or damaged. I feel like I've been there. I don't live there, but I've been there where it's not working and I can't get it to work and I want it to work, and I can maybe understand where I am, but I can't speak yet. Or I know who I am, but I don't know where I am. I don't know who you are, or I know you're someone, but why can't I identify it? And having those things not connect it's scary, but I guess for my part, just helped me walk in someone else's shoes. I mean, it's still me, but it's not me at the same time. And then, like I already kind of alluded, emotionally, that panic, that fear, that your brain's just in full flip out mode. It's interesting just to learn that we're not our emotions, right? Our emotions are chemicals that are popping off in our brain that I think matter. I tell my kids all the time, never ignore your heart, never let it drive. You gotta mind your emotions. They're telling you something. But my emotions, if I'm having a grand mal seizure, are basically telling whatever it is that they're trying to communicate, everything is wrong. Right? There's not enough fuel. This tank's going to shut down soon. This is horrible, right? But then your body is almost in like full fight or flight mode. All the adrenaline, all the cortisol, all the chemicals are just firing, and you come out of that and you're kind of just spazzed. You can't get your thoughts back together and your heart back together, and it takes a little while. I can't remember any events where I would have one at night and be able to go to school the next day, because my body would be so worn out, and if I had to get glucagon, which is that shot I mentioned, that would make me sick. And even sometimes just the physical exertion on my body, I'd be ill and vomiting and such. So, weird experience. I remember I'm always being kind of embarrassed that my parents had to help me, but man, looking back, they were rock stars. They took care of me, and not every kid gets that, and I did. So very, very thankful. Because I'm sure it was hard, watching your kid. I'm glad I have it and never had to watch me have it, because to watch one of my boys, my daughter, go through that, that's got to be hard. So So parents out there raising kids with diabetes type 1, hang in there, find friends, find support. You're doing good work. And yeah, that's real. And then translating that forward into my marriage, I just got to be transparent. And I've mentioned this before, and my wife knows this. But as I was, wanting to get married and have a family of my own, but I'm somebody who would have seizures periodically, and as stress increased, or if I messed up my dosage, or I counted my carbs wrong, and I'm not the most detail-oriented person, and I can get distracted pretty easily sometimes. Some bad stuff happened. I had an amazing roommate in college. His name was Aaron. Buddy, dude, he was so chill. He would just get me out of it, and he'd go back to bed. It was amazing that he was able to write it out that way. But looking to get married and have a wife and family, you're aware of the fact that I might thrash in bed violently. That changes how you think, right? It makes you wonder, can she handle this? Can she endure me? So I've just got an amazingly strong, mentally and physically wife who's just an athlete and able to help. And by God's grace, I did get diagnosed with epilepsy in 2009. That summer was very, very stressful. And that fall, as I was trying to work my way through the stress of the summer at my job, I was having multiple grand mal seizures a night, and sometimes having difficulty coming out of them. And you hit your head on stuff. I mean, bang your head against a dresser is it's not good for your head or the dresser or the freezer for that matter. So, again, not to be dramatic, but I did get diagnosed. It's hard to know. Maybe I already had a disposition toward it, and my diabetes made that more prevalent. Maybe my brain was fine and just had years of difficulty that evolved into epilepsy. But that is my diagnosis. And at first, when my PA told me that, actually, that's a whole other story I'll get to maybe another time. We can link to that video here in a minute. But when she told me, hey, I think you might have epilepsy, I was just mortified. I'm like, great, another problem. And she was like, no, this could be great because they can treat that and give you some meds, and I bet they'll be able to get that balanced out real quick. And that is what happened. So now I take a medicine that has some effects that I'm not a huge fan of, but I'm a huge fan of not having grand mal seizures and not being the risk to myself or my loved ones. It only happened at night, so it was never an issue for driving or anything while awake, but when you're asleep, you can't feel your body getting low, and your brain's first warning signal is to, have a seizure. So that was my experience. Again, I don't want your pity or anything. It's just something I go through, and lots of folks go through stuff like this. So for those of you who are, hang in there, seek medical help, share your story. As I'll indicate in a later video, I think that was maybe part of my problem is maybe not sharing the story enough with doctors, and perhaps B, not finding doctors who were listening. So some of that evolved and worked out over time, and I'll tell you about that in the next video, like I said. So thanks for tuning in. If you'd be willing to subscribe to the channel, I'd greatly appreciate it, and we will see you next time. Take care.